Right, this is the start of me going through these comments. Financial Times on UK housing. And I kind of vaguely remember already quoting this one. I believe the severity of the problem that those born in the 1980s and 1990s face is underlined by the shifting definition of what constitutes young people. During the financial crash, it usually meant under 24, then it became under 30, now it is used to define under 35 for a young person. This shows that the term young person or young people no longer denotes age, but a socio-economic situation currently associated with an entire generation. Expect the generation to shift to under 40s before the decade is out, and of course, this sets us up. Next comment. One thing that guest speakers consistently said, this is at university, but yeah, when I was at university, was how prepared and focused on our studies we were compared to them. Did you understand that? Doesn't matter if it was a guest speaker, just say it was the resident educator at university says, gosh, you guys are really on the ball compared to us lot when we were at university. There is no option unless you want a life of low-wage precarity. Precarity is kind of an economic term meaning poverty. Basically, it's a fight, it's a war, and if you don't pay attention, you fall back in the war. And losing the war means being poor, probably, because you don't get a good start, probably for the rest of your life, or being on the lower stratas. So they now pay attention at university, or fall behind. Am I angry about it? Hell yeah. It's a question what he's angry about, actually having to pay attention at university. But as I never went to university, as I remember of the people that did go to university, it just seemed a bit of a lark when I was that sort of age. So he's angry about it. Don't know quite what he's angry about, having to pay attention. But hopefully he's angry about knowing that it is a definite fight between him and his friends of who is going to get ahead. And they're not all going to get ahead because such is life. Would I vote for a populist? So we're either talking the strong leader or the socialist leader, who punishes boomers for their sins and then says, it's a mighty tempting proposition. I actually think the young are more responsible than the old and are less likely to protest vote, but I could well be wrong. We should have a timer on this because, okay, we're only 3 minutes 44. Fantastic article, and it was a good article. I've actually chopped it up, but I'm not going to read it to you. Article, and certainly rings true. I believe that tenancy laws would be the most effective place to start looking for a solution. In the short to medium term, renting needs to be able to provide security of tenure in the same way that home ownership does. In the UK, renting is a very dodgy process. I believe it's more dodgy even than in America. And there is a balance in places in Europe, Germany being the classic example, where renting is secured by law. Obviously now, because it's not law, you need a strong man, woman in charge to put these laws in place. Revoking the 1988 and 1996 Housing Acts would be a great place to start. I don't know what they are. Despite the inevitable squealing from the landlord generation, this would have the additional benefit of reducing house prices, obviously a problem for voters. In the long run, reform of property tax away from a transactional-based model towards a land value tax appears optimal. That is to say, for people that aren't UK based, the tax basically for the lifetime is paid on at the sale purchase time, as opposed to America, where their what we could call land value taxes can be often are extremely large every year. There are obviously fors and against both ways of doing it, and it's just one of those things that will have to be sorted out. But looking at the American model, the UK certainly has a lot of leeway in the amount that you can charge somebody for owning a home every year, because they're there and they're not going anywhere. They're not going to run away. They're going to want to keep their home. So they're a nice fixed target if you want to get your tax gun out. Right. The social exclusion of renters who do not have wealthy parents to help to buy a home is not mentioned. It is actually lots, but maybe it wasn't when he started reading. It's very sad that so many don't feel secure enough to start a family. Now, there's lots of talk about whether starting families is actually good or bad, but we can't argue with the fact that an awful lot of people think it's very good and desperately want to do it. And it is incredibly difficult in the UK with so many other things having to be paid for. Right, a comment that I've captured under this, so I must have captured it for a reason, comes in with: a family of 5 in the cottage next door to me were given 2 months' notice to leave. They had been renting it for 11 years. They had 3 children in local schools, all of which had to be moved at very short notice. It is utterly appalling. Yes, that indeed sounds utterly appalling. Strong government needed to stop that sort of thing happening. Oh dear. The economy shifted irreversibly towards fire renterism when Thatcher deregulated the banks in 1986. Oh dear, I wish I hadn't come to this one, because that is a huge subject, and this is almost undeniably true. The economy shifted irreversibly towards fire rentierism when Thatcher deregulated the banks. Forget Thatcher, it was done. Blaming a person who's now dead, it's interesting, but it was done. The thing to note is that banks are irrepressibly naughty. They act like naughty children all the time. They always need a strong hand to keep them under control, or they will do naughty things. It's just that it's a high, very, very, very high power, not just job, but atmosphere, not just banking where you go, yes, hello, yeah, and put somebody some cash, but more the investment banking, where these naughty ideas, they're hot-housed, working long hours and in inhumane conditions, and their minds just go whoppo. Basically, if you can come up with a tricky, wicky little tricky that's going to make lots of money, there's a good chance that your boss will say, bloody well done, call in the lawyers, can we get around this one? Yes, we can get around this one. We are going to get around this one. Why? Because it's our money to make money. And that's the investment banking, and that is what they will always do, and that is why they always need very, very strong regulation. Regulation was lifted in 1986, and the strong hand was not there ever since. And they have come up with an awful lot of tricky wicky tricks to make money, many of which they probably should not have been able to get away with. And seeing we're here, and I'll finish it off. The Thatcher government was in terrible trouble in the early 80s. This is 1986. Whether it was a connived deal, actually a real deal between the banks and government, nobody will probably ever know. But it could well have been that the government said to the banks, we'll deregulate you, but you will now lend more to more people. And the shorthand on that is, the more banks lend to more people, the more money there is, and there will be more money to go around. GDP should increase, as well as inflation, but with the Eastern toys, cheap toys coming in, that was kept under control, and it was mainly assets that started going up, but really didn't totally take off because the banks didn't probably believe the deal in 86. They didn't really believe it till 96. 96, 97, the house prices really started taking off, where the banks could see that what they had to do was lend to more people. Why? Because when a bank lends, it makes money on one side and takes an asset on the other side, which is the house, the mortgage basically. The mortgage is the asset, and they want people to be able to pay back. And they want their assets to be solid, like bank reserves are the most solid you can get. A mortgage isn't bad, as long as the house prices stay up. How do you get house prices to stay up? As long as you keep lending out money, that money that you've lent out will bid up the price of the asset that you're holding in your bank balance sheet on the asset side. I didn't want to go into that. I'll just finish this comment off and say goodbye. The pound went sky high. We're not interested. None of this bothers the established wealthy and their protectors, the Tory party, Conservatives, right-wing people, while Labour seems unaware of the fact that there is a systemic problem which cannot fund its dreams of higher spending, since fire rentierism doesn't deliver growth. It doesn't really. It delivers more money, and it probably actually does deliver a bit more growth as it flies round, but inevitably there are the people that are at the bottom, or like a bagatelle pinball thing. It bounces around, but ultimately the money will fall into a certain fewer amount of pockets and stay there until they want to put in another silver ball. But it's the people borrowing which puts the silver ball really into the machine, and ultimately it bounds around and drops into the few hands at the bottom. So I think that's enough for today. And I really didn't want to do that banking thing. But yeah, any comments? I'm very pleased to have a go with them. Bye.